Hello and welcome to the Kingfisher Podcast. I'm your host, Bronwyn Whitley, and today I have a very special guest with me, a good friend of mine, Gosha Divers. Welcome to the show, Gosha.
Thank you for having me. It's a real honor to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here. I'm looking forward to talking about your journey as a Christian and how you came to know Jesus, because I love story and I love testimony of God's goodness, and I think everybody does. There's so much power in testimony, isn't there?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and so I love hearing people's testimonies and stories, and yours is interesting to me because you came from Poland,
Yes,
right?
That's right. I was born in Poland and brought up until I was 24, until I graduated from university. So all my grown-up life, I've been outside of Poland, but those very important years of growing up, I was there.
And were you raised in a Christian home?
I was raised in a Roman Catholic home. Poland is mainly Roman Catholic. Over 90% country are Roman Catholic. I think these statistics went down since I grew up, but that was the way when I grew up.
Wow, that's a really high percentage.
Yeah, that's right. And you must remember that it's not everyone who says is saved, is actually saved. A lot of those people would call themselves believing but not practicing.
So it's more of a cultural thing and a tradition for some people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you were growing up in Poland, it was part of the USSR, is that correct?
When I was 8 years old, we became a free country. But beforehand, we were actually a communist country.
And what did that look like in your day-to-day life?
Well, I actually don't remember that much from communism. I know that there was shortages of food. Everyone had to work, but the salary, you had to figure out actually how to get yourself food because it wasn't that straightforward. But a lot of those really difficulties that my parents faced, and my brother and my sister remember more of that, I don't actually, thankfully, don't remember that much. But I do remember first free elections, and we were always going to church every Sunday. So whether before elections or after, I can't remember that much from before, to be honest. But yeah, Mom was always praying with us in the evening. And generally the perception was like if we obey the 10 commandments, if we're good people, then, we're going to go to heaven.
So your parents were practicing Catholics?
We're practicing, yes, but we never really read the Bible. No one really ever read the Bible. It was reserved for the priests who knew exactly how to interpret it. We were more, just listening to the stories.
And that's part of the Catholic tradition, isn't it? That we listen to the priests and they interpret the Bible and we don't have to read it for ourselves. Is that correct?
That's the way I grew up with. That I can speak for myself. I don't want to generalize. I think maybe things changed as well. But this is the way it was. I was certainly never encouraged. I think I was encouraged once to read the Bible on Christmas, to read John 1:1, and I tried. It wasn't very popular at the time, so my siblings kind of laughed off me.
And you grew up in a city that was known as a holy city, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
What does that mean for those of us who are not raised Catholic?
Yeah, so there is another city like that in France called Lourdes. It's a very similar thing. There is a monastery from 13th century there that's known as Miraculous Place. There is a picture of Mary holding baby Jesus, and that happened to be around, many miracles happened around where that picture was. So, for example, amidst many, many wars in Poland across the centuries, there was a war where monks had to defend their own monastery, and there was obviously just a few of them, and they faced a big, massive army, and they won this war. So miracles like that. Later on, miracles like healing, a lot of them happened. And in fact, lots of people who came for pilgrimage it's called the Bright Hill. And so anyway, the monastery on the top of the hill, people would come and leave their crutches, their wheelchairs, they would just get.
Wow, that's amazing.
Healed. Yeah, it is amazing. So the perception is it's a place where miracles happen. So a lot of Polish people from all around Poland and probably from outside would come and just search for healing or any other miracles that they need in their life, and they truly believe that's what's happening, and a lot of them are healed. Yeah.
Wow. And what did that mean for you as a kid watching all of this?
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of the events throughout the year where pilgrims would come, or when the Pope, John Paul II, who was Polish, particularly then, when would be masses and masses of people, loads and lots of people in the city. And it was a big event. It was a big thing. I remember us identifying by putting a flags like white and yellow, or white and, of course, white and red is a Polish flag. White and blue is a Mary colors. So
Mary's, okay.
Mary, Mother of Jesus. So there's a big cult of Mary in Częstochowa, in the place where I am. And of course, that carries their own symbols as well.
And what was the white and yellow?
White and yellow is papacy. So,
okay.
Yeah, the Pope, yeah.
Okay. And when you say the cult of Mary, to a Protestant ear, that sounds a little bit strange, but it means something different to Catholics, doesn't it?
It does. It's actually a positive thing. Yeah, for most people around the world, I think it's a negative thing, but in Poland, it's actually a good thing. We believed, I guess, that, of course, Mary is not a sinner and she ascended to heaven because she never sinned. So there is a big emphasis on praying to Mary. I was taught that as well as a child to pray. One of the prayers was to Mary. The other one was obviously Our Father who art in heaven. But yeah, there was a lot of that. And it's like Mary can step in to pray.
To intercede on your behalf.
To intercede, correct. Yeah.
It is interesting because I don't know a lot about the Catholic Church, but I have come across some really interesting traditions that I think we could benefit from in the Protestant Church, having, books of prayer and statements and rituals that describe what we believe and having people repeat those over and over. I think that's valuable because sometimes there are a lot of people in church who don't necessarily really know what it is they believe or what their church believes. And I think there's some value to those traditions.
Yeah, absolutely. There's value in all traditions. The key thing is you don't just want traditions and throw Jesus outside the window, right? You don't,
right.
Because that would be what Pharisees did. So we want to hold those traditions, but you always want to go back to the Bible first and foremost. And I actually sit down with my children and teach them the 10 Commandments because I think it's important for them to know it. But it doesn't mean it's the most important thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think going over those sorts of things helps to shape our children's worldview and how they see themselves and how they interact with the world. And that's important. So I completely agree with where you're coming from. I think it's important to teach these things and to have the traditions and rituals that make sense. Even though for me personally, my personality shies away from ritual and tradition. I'm a very spontaneous, impulsive kind of person. I'm always looking for what's the meaning? Why am I doing this? I don't like to do things for no reason. But as I've gotten older, I can see what the reasons were that some of these things were implemented. Like I say, understanding your own faith and having prayers that you can turn to at different times. But as you said, it's all meaningless. And that's what Paul talks about in the Bible, isn't it? It's all meaningless. It's like clanging cymbals unless you have love, which is the love of Jesus, unless you have Jesus inside of you. And so tell us how your faith journey went from childhood into adulthood.
Yeah, so there is a lot to tell, actually. I could sense, now I know that it was a spiritual war over my life. Of course, at the time, I didn't know that. So my upbringing as a child, of course, I didn't know any other way, but I knew about God and I tried always to do the right thing. I think majority people generally try to do the right thing and not to get in trouble. So I did that until I was around 18 years old and, I started asking a lot more questions. Suddenly the sin became more attractive for me and I had to make a choice. Am I going to live for Christ or am I going to live for myself? And the problem was I didn't have a strong faith that I was convinced God is there and he's real and he cares for me. So it was a story that I've been told, but I didn't have that individual, that relational understanding of who God is.
And you hadn't had any sort of encounter with him or his presence?
No, and exactly. I was in church every week. I was going for summer camps. There's been a lot of that, but I knew about God, but I didn't actually know God. I thought he just died for all, but he didn't necessarily die for me. That was the difference. I didn't actually treat him as my personal savior. And I also thought it's more like a business, like transactional. So God, I'll go to church every week if you let me to heaven. Yeah, it was transactional. It was like treating him, what can I get out of this?
Yeah.
Rather than me serving.
If I go and confess and say my rosaries, then I'm free to live how I choose. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
But it all comes down to the motives of heart, because some people find a real comfort in those traditions, in those rosemary and other prayers. That's when they are still and they are actually immersed in God. So some people, it really works for them great. For me, it didn't work great because my motives of heart were selfish. I wanted to live for myself. So that crossroad at around 18, 19 years old, I chose world, I chose sin, I chose living for me rather than, submitting to God's will.
I remember you talking about music, how music had a big influence in your life.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that rebellious years, I threw myself in the music. Music was the most important thing for me. And because I didn't find myself very attractive or very smart, or there was a stronghold there, obviously not from the family, but it was there. And I tried to be more like listening to the music that boys listen to so that I get their attention. But then I really started liking the music, and, I started to listen to very, very heavy music, heavy metal and death metal and so on. And I didn't realize how step by step that actually, changed my life in a bad way. It's taken the grip of me because the lyrics are very, very dark. And I remember thinking on Christmas Eve, why do I enjoy listening to this 666 album, which was, I couldn't explain why, but obviously the devil was working very, very hard to keep me in his claws.
And how did that impact your life?
Very much so. So I think I've taken a lot of bad decisions as a result. And so partially low self-esteem and trying to be someone else, a lot of those decisions were proving that I am someone who I'm not. It sounds silly now, but I think as a teenager, there's so much going on, so many changes happening in your lives, hormones, and you finish one school, you start another, friends come, friends go,
I think it's a really hard time for everyone, for sure.
Yeah, that's right. And I thought I got it easy, but now from the perspective, I just threw myself into that dark music, and I thought I can be cool and different than others by doing that.
But did you find happiness in that?
No, of course not. Of course not. I thought I did. At the time, if you asked me, I probably would say music was literally my life. And I would hang around only people who listen to heavy metal, because one thing that heavy metal did to me is like they convinced me that all other musics are silly, like they're not for metal is a special, like better than others.
Okay.
So it creates this pride where you're almost like a cult, when like a sect. They make you feel special because of that thing, and it happened to be music in my case, but it has overwhelmed my life. I was only wearing black. I was only hanging out with some kind of people. It's changed so many decisions that if I didn't do that, if I didn't get in that music in the first place, I probably would take a lot different decisions.
And then you left Poland.
Yes, so I graduated in 2005, and a year before we joined the European Union, so the borders were open. I could just go without visa. And I happened to have friends in Scotland. So I thought, well, that's an open door. I might just go after adventure. So I quit my job. I finished my master's, and I thought, yep, I'm packing up and going. And it was great, except I was just a graduate and I had to really start from the beginning. Obviously, from career perspective, I fell in love in Scotland.
What field did you go into?
Oh, I had to go to I took the very first job that...
But what did you study?
Oh, yes, I did marketing and management.
Okay.
So I had a master's in that, but I also had a bachelor in tourism and hotel management. Yeah, so
okay. Yeah, well, you've come a bit of a distance from there.
a big, yes.
Yeah.
I've never really used my degrees, which is...
I'm sure that they've been useful.
Yeah, well, as I always say, uni teaches you logical thinking more than...
And broadens your horizons and
Yes.
understanding, yeah.
That's right.
And so then you ended up in Scotland and trying to find your way in a new country where you didn't know many people at all.
Mm-hmm.
And how did that go?
Yeah, look, I loved Scotland. People were lovely. Landscape was fantastic. I loved cycling at that time, so it would be my time to just discover the country, and I loved it. I probably would stay. After about 6 years, I met, and there's been a lot happening in that 6 years. I went through a major breakup and so on. But in that 6 year, around that time, I met my husband, and he said he wants to move to Australia, which at the time I probably would never consider that. But I decided to give it a go, and I came from the family of travelers. So it was an opportunity to see the world. Why not? So I said I'll give it a go, but I didn't think it would happen actually. So we went to the Work Expo, and they actually gave us both jobs. Well, there was an interview and a process to that, but as a result, we both got jobs, and I couldn't believe it. Once I said yes, I had to follow through. So we dropped the dog in Poland. I had a dog with me who came from Poland and now came back to Poland. My parents, thank God.
Traveling with a dog internationally is quite challenging.
Yes, 30 hours.
We had to bring our dog back from the United States to Australia, and that was a huge ordeal. It's very expensive, and then he had to stay in quarantine for a month. I don't recommend it.
That's why we didn't bring my dog here to Australia. But we were tied to 2-year contract, but they paid for visa, first month accommodation and so on. So it was a great deal and a great opportunity. And so at first it just sounded wonderful. And the first month was a never-ending holiday. It was just hot from minus 20 to plus 35.
Yep, welcome to Australia.
That's right. But the first month and the work happened to be a little bit different than I thought it would be. Australians do things a bit different than UK. UK train, at that time at least, they trained you for everything. And here I was thrown a bit to the deep end. So it was challenging. And suddenly after a month, I realized, hold on a second, my friends, my family, everything that I love is kind of left behind. And I felt like I live in paradise, but I'm the most miserable person in the world. And why is that? And later on, Jesus actually reminded me this and said, see, this is what it is. If you went to heaven and you had anything you want, but I'm not there, this is what it's like.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So I wanted people, I wanted relationship, I wanted love and, all those people. And somehow, that misery, it had to happen in my life because that was probably the most crucial part for my salvation. So in all this, someone told us, go to church and you will meet nice people. And which we did. And I don't know.
Now, at this stage, were you married?
We were not married. We were engaged.
Okay. And was your husband a Christian?
He was a Christian.
Okay.
But I didn't quite know what that means, to be honest. We never actually even talked about this much.
So he wasn't raised Catholic?
He was not. Oh, he had some roots in Catholics and some in Protestants. So he had both, actually.
So he had an understanding?
He had an understanding. But we never talked about faith. Okay. Really. I was not interested. So that's probably why. I reckon he probably secretly prayed for me. But of course, I didn't know that at that time.
And did you bring your Catholic faith with you when you left home, or did it sort of stay behind in Poland?
Oh, it stayed behind me. I think I when I was on that crossroad at the age of 18, I think that was when I started falling away from God. So I was not only just acknowledging, but not following. Now I was really on the verge of, are you there, are you not there? I'm not sure. I can't submit my whole life if I don't know. I just didn't know. And I did try to ask some questions beforehand at around 18 years old to one of the priests, but he couldn't answer and my heart was definitely not ready. I think no matter what he told me at that point, I probably would not change, not come to become a believer.
Okay.
So then we went to church.
Okay.
And that was a very strange feeling because the church didn't look like churches back in Europe where you have cathedrals and all that, you know.
It was a modern church, an Australian church.
It was just a building.
It was a building.
It was just a building, yes.
And was it sort of a charismatic type of church or what kind of church?
It was Pentecostal.
Yeah, Pentecostal. So that would have been very different. Yes. To what you were used to.
Very, very different, till the point that I think it's a miracle that I didn't run away from that building. And
you didn't walk straight back out again. That's good.
Yeah. So I stayed. I thought I'll give it a go. At least I'm going to get some, rock concert or something. But I challenged God then. it was just a moment of desperation. I said, God, if you are real and if you care for me, really change me save me from the misery that I am at work. And I specifically said work because work was very much pulling me down at that moment. And just to give you a bit of context, I had a line manager who was fantastic, but he didn't give me any work. There was another person who actually was giving me tasks to do. And she didn't quite know how to do it. I didn't quite know. She was thrown into the deep end, and so was I. And I was incredibly stressed and didn't deal with that stress well because back in UK, we were always trained, and here I didn't get that. So it probably impacted my self-esteem again, poked that weak spot.
Yeah, and you were already feeling a bit in the deep end, and that just made things worse.
So I kept asking myself, why did I do this to myself? I could just go back home and, not deal with any of that. But when I challenged God in church, and it was just between me and him, it was not a prayer anyone heard, it was right in my head. The next day, my line manager actually got me into the meeting room, and he said, from now on, you're going to work only for me. And the minute he said that, it was my salvation moment. I lifted my eyes and I said, God, you are real, you care for me, and you proved to me, I know that you're real. And so then that truth really set me free. It was all the chains and the lies and all that was gone. I couldn't not see the truth now that I knew it.
Wow, I love that so much. It was like the veil was removed and you could see the truth.
Yeah, that's right. I just knew, somehow I knew. It wasn't a coincidence. And it happened like day after day. So it was amazing. And of course, a week later, we came back to this church because now I knew that God is there. So I had a great faith that, I'm going back there. This is finally, I'm getting some breakthrough. And there was an altar call, and I obviously raised my hand. And they would do altar call every week, and I had no idea what that is. So every week I would say, I want Jesus. And they would just keep giving me those Bibles. And I'm like, what's going on here? I don't understand. What am I supposed to do here? So anyway, I didn't understand, but my concept was if you go to the confession, like once a month from the Catholic background, I just thought you need to confess Jesus your Lord and Savior every week.
Okay.
And it didn't do anything bad. But it was
fine.
Funny. It was just funny. Yeah.
It's good to remind yourself every week.
That's right.
I do want this. I do want Jesus.
That's right. Yes. And the transformation that happened in me is probably the biggest proof of my salvation. So obviously I got connected with, I was a discovery course that they were running at the time in a small groups, and it was fantastic. All the millions and millions of Christians that I had, because obviously I started reading the Bible for the first time in my life, and all those questions started piling up, and I had this wonderful leader. She answered essentially every single question.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and which is what rooted me really in it, because you can hear the gospel, and if it falls in a wrong ground, but this was great, and I've really got proven myself. I've done the right thing. There's not that I've done anything. Really, God saved me.
Yeah,
but it was just.
But you made the right choice.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And how long ago was that?
That was 12 years ago.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So you've been walking with Jesus for 12 years.
Yeah, that's right. So I've been so hungry ever since. Super hungry, like just insatiable hunger for God, for the Bible, for praying, for all my motives of my heart, all my priorities changed. Everything changed. I was like completely another person. Yeah,
so it changed your life in a way that other people would be able to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Especially my husband. He saw it all happening. So it was transformation, like almost unrecognizable who I was before. And I know obviously more because we sin in our head before we sin through our actions and words. So I knew how much different I think.
So your thought life had changed?
Very much so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all the motives of heart. Suddenly it aligned with Jesus. What he loves, I started loving, and what he hates, I started hating. So I didn't want to sin anymore. Before it was like I had to do certain things. It was a checklist, go to church.
Follow the rules.
That's right. Follow the rules, because not to get in the bad books, not to end up in hell.
Yeah,
it's fear-based.
It's a very good point. It's a difference between follow the rules so that you can be a good person versus I want to be a good person and do these things because Jesus lives in me and I love him so much.
That's right. I just wanted to please him with all my heart. It's very different. So they say the beginning of the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right? But the end is the love. When you do things out of love, that's exactly what Jesus wants us to do. So, but I didn't do any hard work. He did it all for me. All the repentance and change of my lifestyle, of whatever, how I was before, worldly. Now, suddenly, I couldn't put up with this. I was just totally new creation.
Oh, I love that so much. That's wonderful. And then how has that impacted your family? At some point you got married and you've had some children.
Yes, that's right. So I got married probably 4 months after my salvation moment. Actually, I got married and I got baptized in the same month, which is very special.
That was a good month.
yeah, probably the best. Yes, and of course we have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old now. So the life has changed. It got busy. Being a parent taught me another level of love. I think how much Jesus loves us so much. We don't really grasp it, but it brought me a step closer of understanding really what's it like. And trusting in him and, doing life with God is very different than doing life without God. When you go through tough moments, the valley, of the shadow of death, when you're with God, you've got the rod and staff, you've got that hope, and he carries you through the tough moments.
Yeah.
When I went through the valleys of my life without God, it was a very dark place. It was a very different place where there is no guarantee you can ever get out of that. So there's so much hope in God and so much better life.
And you've witnessed your husband renew his faith as well, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Over the years, he's actually done a course. He actually threw himself on that journey with me because when I got saved, I've done theology course, we've done marriage course, we've done all that from the biblical perspective and a few more. And anything that was there, we would just come. If you told me then there is a Bible study, middle of the night, 2 hours drive, I would do it. I would go because I was so hungry. And so he kind of came along with me to this journey. But it wasn't until a few years ago when I noticed the biggest transformation in him when he's done one of the courses in our current church. And it's just...
Yeah, we have a transforming course at our church, which really is transformational.
Yes.
It's life-changing. And not because the course in particular, but because it takes the concepts of really looking into your life and at the places where you need healing and trusting God for that healing and inviting God into all of the corners of your life and everything that's going on.
Yeah, that's right. And also timing is very important because you can do those courses in different stages of your life, but there comes a moment when you're desperate enough, when you make enough room in your heart for God. I think when in those moments, God actually shows himself and proves to be right here with you, holding your hand, what you're going through. Is never distant, but we just don't always recognize it. And so I think maybe for my husband, it was the right timing that the transformation is incredible. I barely notice. I'm wondering if this is the same person.
You don't recognize him anymore?
Correct. In a good way.
Yeah, well, he is wonderful and we love him too. And I'm just so grateful that you joined me today. Thank you so much for being on the Kingfisher Podcast. Thank you to everyone for joining us. I hope you will tune in again next week and have a great day.